Welcome to The Debate. Speaking proficiency. It remains one of the major hurdles in second language acquisition, and often the stumbling block isn't a lack of linguistic knowledge, not vocabulary or grammar, but these profoundly stubborn psychological barriers. We're talking about crippling anxiety, acute self-doubt, and just low self-confidence.
That's absolutely the core of it. We see countless students, even those in advanced language programs, who say they are fundamentally unable to communicate or learn effectively. And that so often it just comes down to their internal monologue, the self-talk that spirals into this persistently negative cycle.
Exactly. And recent correlational quantitative research has given us a stunning insight into just how powerful that internal dimension really is. We now have evidence showing a very strong positive correlation. We're talking a near 90% predictive link between a student's self-talk and their actual speaking ability. This finding suggests the internal psychological dynamic is not secondary, but really critical.
It is certainly significant data. A powerful relationship, no doubt.
And that empirical finding forces us to confront our central question today. Should language acquisition pedagogy pivot to prioritize, explicit training in internal psychological regulation, specifically positive self-talk or PST, to boost speaking proficiency, or must pedagogy fundamentally rely on external, socially mediated interaction in authentic communication contexts? I'm going to argue that psychological intervention, PST, is the most effective and direct path to proficiency, citing that stunning predictive evidence.
And I will argue that while that internal dialogue is crucial, yes, it's best understood as private speech, a concept from Vygotsky's sociocultural theory, which we can just call SET. And I maintain that this internalized mechanism only develops in a meaningful and accurate way when it's anchored in rich, socially mediated activities.
I see why you prioritize the social component. I do. But let me give you a different perspective. It's one grounded firmly in performance psychology and, the empirical data. That very high correlation means the psychological component holds immediate, high-leverage power, potentially more so than just drilling more grammar rules. Explicit positive self-talk training directly addresses fundamental psychological needs, the anxiety, the self-doubt, that traditional, textbook-focused methods so often just fail to touch. Studies using PST intervention have shown really dramatic results, including significant and measurable enhancements in self-confidence scores. This is crucial because data shows that half of some student samples engage in these highly critical, self-defeating internal narratives, where just one small mistake is immediately catastrophized. PST provides actionable tools like affirmations and mental mirroring that interrupt this destructive cycle and build the essential mental toughness required for actual public speaking.
Well, I come at it from a completely different direction. While those demonstrable gains in confidence are compelling, correlation, even when that's strong, it doesn't dictate the primary instructional focus, nor does it really explain the origin of language-specific competence. For us, self-talk or private speech it's just inextricably linked to Vygotsky's social-cultural theory. SET views language learning as a fundamentally social process where participation in communicative activities is paramount. That internal monologue isn't just some psychological button you can push. It is an internalization of external social dialogue. Speaking itself is defined by researchers as the act of conveying ideas, establishing communication, and achieving pragmatic goals in interactive discourse. Without that authentic, rich social environment providing external feedback and structure, the internal talk just lacks the essential scaffolding it needs to be meaningful and, frankly, grammatically correct for real communication.
Okay, let's delve into that distinction then, the nature and origin of this internal language. You insist on conceptual clarity rooted in Vygotsky's focus on, social and cultural artifacts driving cognitive development. But if the goal is functional communicative competence, just getting the learner to speak, the internal psychological mechanism is what determines if the learner is willing and able to access the linguistic knowledge they already possess.
Precisely. We have to maintain conceptual rigor here. If private speech is, by definition, an internalization of social and mediated dialogue, and we know it is, then how can we claim that an internal skill, divorced from the dynamic social surroundings like the teacher-peer connection or the group dynamic, can truly lead to competence? The initial mediation and support must come from that social framework. For instance, the crucial SCT concepts like the zone of proximal development, the ZPD, which is the space between what a learner can do alone and with assistance. These concepts absolutely require social interaction to even be operationalized.
I agree that social interaction is the ultimate objective, of course, but practically speaking, the internal negative narrative is the biggest bottleneck preventing action. When students feel they are unable to communicate, it's rarely a lack of linguistic rules. It's the mental paralysis that just stops them from trying. We have robust psychological research showing that positive self-talk has a profound, even unconscious impact on a person's willingness to act. So when we see study results confirming that addressing this specific mental state, reducing anxiety, boosting self-confidence is the primary leverage point, we have to prioritize it. PST intervention directly prepares the mind to overcome that initial crippling fear, which then allows the linguistic machinery they already have to finally function in social settings. It addresses the emotional toll that language learning carries.
That makes sense as a powerful tool for emotional management. It's fundamentally about using language as a meditational tool within a community. If a learner is only focused internally, they might just become more confident in their errors. You need the interaction among learners and the expert to truly scaffold the acquisition process, as scholars like Donato and Swain have thoroughly documented.
But consider the sheer scalability and consistency that PST offers. We know that real-world language learning requires immersion, but most students can't afford to just move abroad. This practice is autonomously available throughout the student's day. Learners can effectively build language practice into their routine by talking to themselves, whether they're getting ready, commuting, or even grocery shopping. We see hundreds of self-talk English conversation phrases available online, designed to help students internalize the language. By focusing on using their phone or audio content as a kind of immersion device, they're getting constant, autonomous practice.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because practicing alone, whether using those canned self-talk phrases or even recording yourself, it still critically lacks one essential external element: corrective feedback. As nearly every successful language learner will tell you, without external correction, you're never going to know if you're making fundamental errors. Language is intrinsically a social construct. While integrating learning into routines like, watching target language content on YouTube is fantastic for exposure and vocabulary, the very goal of speaking is inherently social and interactive. If the aim is to accomplish pragmatic communication goals, we need interactive teaching methodologies like the cooperative learning model, not just self-affirmation in isolation.
But we have to acknowledge the psychological benefit of that autonomous practice, especially for students who struggle immensely with social anxiety. Practicing in private builds fluency and it reduces the cognitive load of stress, even if they aren't immediately getting that corrective external feedback. They can use speech shadowing or self-recording as a method of self-monitoring, which fosters learner autonomy. And learner autonomy is absolutely critical for long-term mastery, regardless of the theoretical framework you're using.
Learner autonomy is critical, yes. But its most robust form develops through structured social interactions, not in isolation. While we acknowledge the experimental findings supporting PST, the limitations often point to the need for a deeper understanding of how to properly operationalize Vygotskian concepts like scaffolding and the ZPD in teaching practices. SCT provides a comprehensive, proven framework for teachers to facilitate structured peer interaction, group help, and real-world task completion. Meaning and accuracy are co-constructed through collaboration, not internal exercises. This structured social support is arguably more robust and foundational than purely internal psychological interventions.
Look, respectful debate is a path toward truth, and the truth here is empirical. Self-talk demonstrably works to significantly improve speaking skills, alongside motivation and self-confidence.
The quantitative finding showing that near 90% predictive power is highly reliable. This means that teachers and curriculum designers have a pedagogical responsibility to be focusing on modeling and encouraging constructive self-talk to foster a positive attitude toward the educational process, making language learning feel enjoyable and simple. We know that students who use positive self-talk strategies produce more favorable, measurable results. Addressing the psychological block, getting students to truly believe they can speak, is the necessary prerequisite to effective social engagement. It's not just some secondary benefit.
I agree wholeheartedly that fostering a positive attitude is indispensable, but we must be careful not to conflate the catalyst with the primary mechanism of acquisition. SCT dictates that the internalization of private speech stems from dynamic social surroundings. While self-talk prepares the individual psychologically and it removes the barrier of anxiety, the actual linguistic restructuring and the achievement of accurate communicative goals still demand external interactive practice, peer-supported scaffolding, and a focus on authentic communicative tasks. The psychological intervention has to ultimately serve that social objective.
So we've established that self-talk is extremely strongly correlated with speaking ability, and that explicit, positive self-talk strategies effectively enhance critical factors like confidence, motivation, and ultimately measurable speaking proficiency. The strong positive data suggests that unlocking the individual's internal narrative holds the key to utilizing their full linguistic potential.
And we agree that the internal monologue, or private speech, is indispensable for cognitive development. However, we maintain that this capacity is best leveraged and developed when it's embedded within rich, socially mediated learning environments informed by Vygotskian principles, where interaction, peer feedback, and achieving real-world pragmatic goals define the entire learning process.
It seems clear that improving speaking skills necessitates a truly holistic approach, recognizing both the profound influence of internal psychological regulation and the fundamental necessity of a robust social communicative context.
Indeed. The vital next step for curriculum designers is exploring how best to seamlessly integrate potent PST strategies into collaborative social learning activities, making sure that the student is psychologically prepared for the social stage of learning.